A Sharp Revisited.
Hello everyone and welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we see what's up with the recent music releases. I am Joe, the music critic supervillain, and with me, as always, is the upstanding civilian Nick.
Heyo. I sound all happy. It's not a happy day, Joe. I've got something I think we need to talk about quickly before we start. It's not good news, unfortunately. You know our beloved Gulag keeper, James?
Yeah.
It looks like he's trying to gather the Infinity Set.
The the Infinity Set. What's that?
Okay. I kind of expected you to know about the Infinity Set, being the amazing musician you are. Before the creation of music, there were these 6 singularities, all relating to a specific element that music requires to exist. They were talent, voice, melody, showmanship, popularity, and of course money. And at the moment of creation, the elements were contained in instruments or trinkets and were sent through time to a person who best represented each element. Each item was imbued with great power. Like the pick of infinite talent would create glorious music when strummed on any string. The microphone of unlimited range would unlock a voice box's full potential. The keys of endless creativity would always play a new tune. The Glitterball trophy would be desired by all. Any concert given by the owner of the amplifier of eternal prestige would sell out. And, of course, the voice changer of undeserved mercy would turn shit to gold. Whoever could bring these 6 items together would become master of music and could destroy any music genre that displeased them.
Wow. Okay, so why have we never tried to find them all? Because I would love to get rid of trap music altogether.
Look, Joe, I understand the temptation, but then who would we criticise on the podcast?
Oh yeah, there'd be no Quavo.
Yeah.
Fair point. Well, we must prevent them from getting into I mean, James is our Gulag keeper's hands.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Joe, but it's too late. I mean, you remember when he confiscated that thing from Fergie about a month ago?
Yeah.
That may have been the voice changer of undeserved mercy. Who knows what he's doing with it now?
Anyway, let's get on with it. Why don't you introduce the acts that we got first up, Nick?
Okay, then we're going to start with the greatest boy band in the world currently, Brockhampton.
Yeah, since One Direction.
Since One Direction. So, Brockhampton, probably the band we've actually reviewed most on the podcast.
Yeah, we reviewed them 3 times.
That's
3 albums, and then we did singles as well, and separate ones, so yeah.
Yeah, so they have a new album out called Iridescence. If you didn't already know, Brockhampton are a 16-piece hip-hop collective, and this is their 5th album, their first one the year after. They really blew up last year, had 3 albums out in the Saturation trilogy. This is the start of a new trilogy called The Best Years of Our Lives. And I mean, they're riding high on such an incredibly successful year. And this is also the first album without member Amir Van, who was kicked out, I believe, at the start of this year for sexual abuse allegations. So I was quite interested to see how the album would flow without him on it.
Yeah, and how they'd make up for his lack of being there.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm completely honest, if there was one member who I wanted to go, probably Amir, because I mean he had one flow that he did in every single song. It never changed. He didn't really feel like he was trying to bring much new.
And I have to say, considering listening to this album, this new album Iridescence, I don't really miss him going forward. So yeah, it sounds harsh, but I don't have a conscience about it. So
I feel like sometimes the bits that I would expect to hear him at are filled in by Don McLennan pretty well. Anyway, moving on from them doing the Saturation trilogy, I feel like this, I mean, it definitely strays from the formula of the Saturation trilogy albums because they were all very, very similar, and it's more experimental in its production and flows. This is a band who have been given complete creative freedom to do what they want, and it was recorded in Abbey Road Studios. Can you believe 1 year and they're recording in Abbey Road? I want to record in Abbey Road. So this new experimental sort of production and the flows on the album, it benefits specific members, I think, while isolating some others. For example, Joba and Merlin, always the most sort of wacky members of the group. They're really in their element this time around, I think, delivering, I mean, some of their best verses appear on this album. You've got Joba on Jouvert, which is scary, very aggressive.
Scary. I really liked that verse.
Yeah.
He's so angry in it as well. He's got so much conviction.
And he mentioned, I don't know how he manages to control his voice without it cracking at that point. It's so just, conviction.
Yeah.
And then you've got Merlin on both the tracks, where the Kashat and Tonya as well, really showing the dichotomy of what he's able to deliver.
I feel like I got more depth of personality from him in this album than basically all the saturations combined, if I'm going to be honest. And I think him having more space with Amir Gone actually kind of helped with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it felt like I was getting less crowded personalities, and they were able to pull through a bit more on this album.
But then on the other hand, you've got the biggest victim on this album, I think, is Matt Champion, who I found very difficult to notice.
Same.
In Tonya, in the final chorus, you can hear him yell, "I don't matter," and I just thought that really just sums it up. Because he's pretty much invisible on the album. There's only one verse I can think of where he really stands out to me, and on all the other tracks, he just sort of disappears under the other members.
I have to see, looking through my notes, I don't really have that much to say about his contributions. I'd probably say the same a bit for Kevin Abstract as well, a little bit. I mean, he does make some contributions that are notable, but he was always one of the more prominent members of the group, and I don't feel like that's so much the case on this album.
Yeah, well, with Matt Champion, just talking about the "I Don't Matter" bit, I mean, as well as it sort of being there on the album, when they first debuted Tonya, it was on the Jimmy Fallon show, their late night debut, and he actually has more to say in that final chorus. He repeats it a few more times, and really you can hear it in his voice. He gets it once here, and then he just disappears. He just gets to shout "I don't matter" once, and that really disappointed me because I thought that was one of the best parts of the song. So poor Matt Champion. And also Don McLennan, I feel like has tried to be a bit more experimental. Like, as we know, the various members of Brockhampton have experimented with pitch shifting and distorting their voices before, and Don McLennan tries to do it here, and I don't think it works particularly well on most of the songs. Thug Life, for example, at the end of that, he's got one of his best verses on the album, but I can't get over just how bad the pitch shifting on his voice sounds.
Yeah, I see. That's my favourite verse of the album. I think I even wrote down some of the lyrics. I might as well just read them out now. I see the shadows inside. They 10 feet tall with no eyes. They put my head in the water and it's so beautiful under. The sun reflecting off the corals. Colours I can't describe to make the darkness divine. And his flow is fantastic. His flow always is. He's probably my favourite member still.
He's the poet of the group.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, there is something about... about his vocals there that aren't quite there, but I think because I like his rapping, I give it a pass there. But I see what you mean on that one.
Yeah. Well, I think that in general, this album, it contains some of the group's best and some of their worst work, in my opinion. I mean, you're probably going to disagree with me on that because you hated Saturation Fury.
There's nothing as bad here as Boogie or Johnny, in my opinion. But in a way, I do agree. Like, I have to highlight. Well, we've already talked about Tonya. It is one of my favourite tracks. I like how they try to go with some modern classical touches with that piece, and it did. I do think it did work.
It's the most organic sounding song on the album.
Yeah, so that was very much appreciated. Wait as well has one of the most sonically pleasing moments in their entire discography. You probably know what I'm about to say. About 1 minute 20 seconds
where
in,
the drums come in, and you've got the chopped vocals.
The chopped vocals.
Yeah,
it is so nice. It's so nice, and it works. And it's like that moment of euphoria. I love it every single time. So those were two tracks I thought were fantastic. But yeah, there are some tracks which I'm shaking my head at.
Wait is a real great moment for me because I actually think that the beginning of the album is just not very good. New Orleans comes in, and I remember listening to it for the first time and going, okay, wow, this is Brockhampton now. And then 10 seconds later thinking, that's such an annoying mosquito sound in the background. And then it goes on for far too long, not really changing up at all. And I think that also causes issues with the second track because the transition from New Orleans into Thug Life is pretty flawless. Yeah. But because they sound like one track and the first half is too long, and by the end of it I'm getting a bit... it means it affects Thug Life as well for me too. It's a
Yeah, I
shame.
have to agree. Honestly, I felt like they should have cut the first 5 tracks off the album. I mean, they could have saved the Dom's verse on Thug Life, maybe found another
Yeah,
way to use it, and Jover's verse on Berlin I thought was great, but other than that, the first 5 tracks
yeah.
and some of the beats were a bit dime a dozen, I thought.
I think Wait is a great opening track as
Yeah.
well. It really should have started there. I mean, I agree with you. Don McLennan's verse on Thug Life is brilliant, and Merlin's verse on Where the Cash At I think is also pretty great. But
Mm.
besides that, the song's a bit. Something About Him is my least favorite track on the album. I hate it. I really really hate Kevin Abstract's distorted, pitch shifted vocals on it. It just sounds
Okay, well,
horrible.
firstly with that track, it doesn't flow at all between the two adjacent tracks, Berlin and Where the Cash At. Something that surprised me, considering, as we said, the first 2 tracks have this great flow. You'd think maybe this is something they're thinking about in this album, but then, Something About Him doesn't flow from Berlin, Where the Cash At doesn't flow from Something About Him, Wait doesn't flow from Where the Cash At. But back to Something About Him, I just don't like how asinine some of the lyrics are. They're very, oh, it's something about him. It's so cliche. And then the chorus is basically, I like this about you. I like that
Yeah,
about you. And I just,
I sort
it
of
wearied me a little bit.
I sort of compare it to Love by Kendrick Lamar, which I think was one of the weaker tracks off of Damn, but
Hmm.
also it was endearing, whereas this
Yeah.
just isn't.
Well, I found that to be the case on a couple of other tracks on this album as well. But I just wanna make the point that sometimes their earnestness is quite endearing, and I did feel that on Saturation One. I think about Milk, and I thought that made my heart melt. But then it felt like the Saturation 2 and 3, they were moving away from that and kind of maturing as songwriters. But then on this album, you've got songs like Something About Him that's gone back to this quite immature style of songwriting, and then there's the end of San Marcos, which was too cheesy for me.
Oh, I love it.
It was too cheesy for me. I can understand people liking it, but I really couldn't.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't sure about it the first time I listened to it, but it really, I think I just fell for it eventually. It broke this cold heart.
Okay. Well, my heart shall remain far too cold.
Well, let's talk about the latter part of the album because it's better than the first five
Yeah,
tracks, I
yeah.
think, overall. Something I'd like to point out is one of the things that I was not completely sold on with the first three Saturation albums was the skits. Each album had
Mm,
3 skits on it, and I thought they were okay on the first one, and then after that they got a bit long, and it just would be like, oh, it's the
yeah,
skit now. I think that Loophole, the one skit on this album, is actually great.
yeah.
I think it works really well. I love the theme of it, the interview talking about how it's like not really knowing how to deal with fame
Mm.
and wondering why people weren't telling you about how it worked beforehand and, false friends and all that. I think it really works with the themes of this album.
Yeah, and I quite like how it's directly in the middle of the album as well. It just feels like a nice break between, Act 1 and Act 2.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
works really nicely. And it does work thematically with some of the songs that then come after it, which, it's just a nice placement.
yeah. And I think from Wait onwards, the production and mixing on the album is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, once you get past the mosquito sound in New Orleans and the fact Berlin sounds like desperate to move from one idea to the other without really like giving them the depth they deserve. You get, for example, I mean, they sample Radiohead on the song
Yeah.
tape. That's
Yeah,
ballsy.
videotape.
Yeah,
And it works well.
yeah,
And I think the sound and the ominousness it produces works well with the theme of struggles that they go through in the songs. It is one of my favourite songs on the
yeah.
album.
It's one
It's
of mine as well.
really good.
And I mean, I know you don't agree, but I think the vibes produced from the guitar tones in San Marcos and then the London Community Gospel Choir at the end just make me want to cry. Then you get the heavier moments, like in the very final track, Fabric. You get that bass drum that comes in, doing the four to the floor pattern, and getting more and more distorted until it just
Mm.
ends the song, which is it's
Yeah.
great. I love it. And then there's my biggest problem with the latter half of the album, which is how the album ends, because it should have just ended with the kick drum hitting
Yeah.
the floor, silence, that's it, and then it goes into 20 seconds of what?
Yeah, it's a very weird ending.
I mean, I get that it's probably going to go directly into the next album, but Why couldn't they just go directly into the next album with the kick drum bit ending? It sounds so good.
They want to tease us, Nick.
I don't like it.
They want to tease us.
Well, what are your favourite tracks then besides Tonya and Tape?
Tonya, Tape, Weight, and I liked Fabric, and Jova I wasn't sure on, but it's grown on me. It's grown on me quite a lot. So yeah, those are my highlight tracks.
I think that's sort of the same for me, actually. I quite like District as well, but only really because I just find it irresistible to sing along to the bit. It's like simmer down, simmer down, simmer down, simmer down.
Oh, actually, yeah, I got something to say. Praise God, hallelujah. I'm still depressed. I love Jova's line there.
Good.
It's great. So,
in fact, Jova has some of the most quotable bits on the album.
Oh, definitely.
We're born with a dollar sign attached to our temple.
Yeah, so Jova was really, really carrying where some of the other members might have been lagging. So yeah.
Yeah. I just want to talk about Tonya for a bit because it's one of my favourite songs they've ever released, I think. Like I said, it's the most organic, sort of raw song on the album, and even though the lyrics are just sort of more the same, alluding to the pressures of fame, I just think all of the performances on that track are brilliant, and I love how it transitions from the simple piano melodies into the beats mixed with the cello, and then you've got Merlin, who I think delivers the best lines on the album with a "Don't think too fast, private jet still crash, and I'll still fly coach, and I'll still hit a roach, and I'll still see roaches at the crib where my folks at." I mean, that's just so very humble and sort of what I'd expect, but also not expect Merlin to be saying. I mean, he's proven before on songs like Milk that he can have these verses where he's, completely down to earth and serious rather than his usual goofy self. But it's always lovely to see. And then the outro, it's just too good with the layered vocals and the electric guitar.
Yeah, I basically agree.
I think that this album, like I said, some of their best work, some of their worst work. If it started on Weight, it would probably be my favourite album by them because I really don't have many complaints at all about the tracks from that point onwards. So I would give this a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm more or less the same. I would say that Vivid I wasn't really a fan on in the second half of the album. At the moment, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10. As you said, a lot of highlights, but some downlights as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to see what they come out with the next two albums in the Best Year of Our Lives trilogy. Because if they just refine what they've already got, beautiful.
And if they just pay a little bit more attention to flow and how things work, between songs, then I think I'll be enjoying them a lot more. So
I do wonder whether they're going to include any of the 3 singles they released sort of between Tonya and before Iridescence came out, such as Truman, for example. I thought was a great track and was really surprised to not see it on the album. But there we go.
We'll see.
That's one album down, Joe.
One down.
Welcome back, everyone. By now you'll have heard my grand plan, of course. Well, good news. I've just stolen the Glitterball trophy. With the voice changer of Undeserved Mercy, it was easy to get a slot on Strictly Come Dancing. I charmed my way past Tess Daly and Claudia Winkleman, disguised as Jeremy Vine, and then fought Craig Revel Horwood in deadly hand-to-hand combat, outcamped Bruno Tonioli, rugby tackled Darcy Bustle, and snuck past Shirley Ballas. My inmates put on an excellent show while I got past the 8 security doors. With the trophy secured, my inmates went into attack mode and gave their lives so I could escape. I'm now headed to Liverpool to get the next one. Soon, all 6 pieces will be mine.
The next one, we've got a new album by Milo. Budding ornithologists are weary of your tired analogies. Oof. Be told. Be told, everyone. So we reviewed Milo's album last year because I listened to it and I was just like, I love it. And then I started having questions about it, but I still love it.
Yeah. It took me a very long time to get into it, but now I think, it's got the song, the 3rd track on the album, which name I've forgotten in the heat of the moment, which starts with, "In the palace of the peacock, eating the kingdom of God." Wow. Wow.
Yeah, he's definitely an intense rapper. Well, his delivery is very mild mannered, but great. But his lyrical themes can be very, very intense,
Yeah.
I think.
His vocabulary and his lexicon just puts shame to all other rappers.
Everyone, and to me, some of the references he just pulls out of nowhere. I'm
Yeah.
having to getting out Google, and sometimes I'll come across a reference that I actually know, and I'll feel smart for knowing it. I know a Milo reference.
Well, that's sort of. I mean, it's the same with his last album and the album before that. That's sort of where my problems with Milo begin. Is that this album is very sort of navel-gazing extravagance to me, lyrically at least. I find that I enjoy this album most when I'm just not paying attention to it. Because if I try and dissect what he's saying as it comes along, I just find myself, I just get a headache. I'm too much of a pleb to listen to
I can
Milo.
definitely understand that. I do enjoy picking apart what he's saying, but of course I have to pause it, do some research, and pick it apart. But I think that's just in my nature to like doing that. I do see what you mean when you say it's very much carrying off from the beats of previous albums. There are some tracks on here where I do think this is basically a track on Who Told You to Think, but sometimes not as striking, or the overall point isn't quite got across as well as previous work.
Yeah, there weren't as many points on this album which stood out to me as there were on his previous album. I mean, just in general, I feel like I could listen to this from start to finish and not get a huge amount out of it if I wasn't like really trying to. I mean, there are some real standout moments for me. My favourite track on the album is actually Stet, and that's just because
it's great.
I do not know how he manages to rap over that verse. Those beats are so wonky.
It's jazzy and glitchy, and then you've got that bass fill that's abrasive, but it just comes out of nowhere and fizzles back in.
And then the way that the trumpets come in and they build up the momentum of the song, and then they drop in and then out and then in again as if they're unsure how to proceed with such a confused beat.
Yeah.
It's also got one of my favourite lines on it, which is the sweeter the berry, the blacker my folgers, the darker my grey clouds, and yet how it seems to thicken my PayPal so steadily.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's one of my. I wrote that down as well because that song is about his relationship with rapping, but it actually delves into these quite interesting topics of how it's used to explore his identity, but it's also used for money and all these kind of things. I mean, you're better off listening to the song than my explanation of it. But yeah, I thought it was a complex and really, really great track.
I think the fact that track stands out also sort of leads me down the path of talking about how some of the instrumentals on the album are far better than others. Some of them feel a bit half-baked, to be honest.
I'll agree with you there.
My least favourite track on the album is Failing the Stress Test. I just think that it's got one of the most lackluster beats on it, and there's something else which I find problematic about it, which is that it's got another killer delivery on it of lyrics about sort of victim blaming that's used by accused, sexual offenders, I guess, in this situation. And he's talking very specifically about one of his idols, Bus Driver, and he delivers the line, "It's hard to listen to your favourite song when the CD's skipping. When Heroes is prone to victim blaming, do it matter where the missile's aiming? I think not." I think that's brilliant. But then he's doing it over the sound of a woman receiving sexual pleasure, and it just feels really... It just makes me feel queasy, to be honest.
It's a very weird moment.
Yeah.
Very weird moment. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but either way, it's definitely not one of my favourite tracks on the album. I do agree with you, some of the backings, and there was one backing in Aubergine Cloak that the sound reminded me too much of, I can't remember what the song is, but there's one song on Who Told You to Think where it uses the exact same sounds, and to me that was just a moment that was a bit too familiar, which is a shame because I think that track is some of the best lyrics on it.
I feel the same way. I've written down the Aubergine Cloak's got a weird sort of rattling hi-hat sound in it, which doesn't actually flow with the rest of the track. It makes it feel very out of time, and he doesn't rap over it in the same way he does with Stet. It's not so much impressive. It's just sort of there, and it seems like he's trying to ignore it.
Yeah, Yeah, I do agree, but I do want to read out some of the lyrics from that song because
Sure.
I just think it demonstrates that he's got some of the best rhyme scheme in the game. Tin can polemic low tone, like Olmec said it. Old school separatist, upper hand on any nepotist. You trying to join the party like I'm hold up, let's see your weapons list.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know how he's just able. He's got such a wide vocabulary, and he has so many references that he picks from. Like I was stunned that he referenced Pierre LeFou on that track as well. I don't know if you've ever seen Cowboy Bebop, but
I know the reference.
you know the reference, and I'm just like, wow, wow, one of the most insane villains of all time, and I'm just like, okay. Like he knows what he's doing. I mean, sometimes it does go over my head, and sometimes I do wonder, like last album, if there is more to it or whether he's just putting on an impressive show. But either way, I enjoyed the show nonetheless.
I like the fact that in the very first track on the album, which is also one of my favourites, Myth Building Exercise number
Yeah.
9, he's got the lines, Nostrum Grocers got the remedy, ain't no average MC ahead of me, they purse yankers who first danger, worship anger, are always clamouring for that artificial trap beat, bro, look like the leader of the Dothraki steering from the back seat. He very much lays out his mission objective with that. He's not about the same things, like in this world of hip-hop, with misogyny and trying to show your clout and all that.
Yeah.
He's not about that. He just wants to speak what's on his mind using his astronomical vocabulary.
Yeah, and personally, I quite appreciate that
Yeah,
approach.
I enjoy listening to this album. I just feel like I don't get as much out of it as Milo wants me to.
Yeah, I feel like that for this album, definitely. Which wasn't the case for Who Told You to Think, which I thought I really got. So I am a little bit disappointed in this album, but I still kind of really like it anyway.
That's fair
So,
enough.
and I do think Milo actually has quite a good sense of humor on some of the tracks in this album, and because he's got such a deadpan delivery, it will go over your head unless you're really looking for it. But like, I just want to read out the opening lines from mid-answer trying to remember what the question is. Huckleberry hounds turned futanari specialist, mid-answer trying to remember what the question is. I didn't realise how funny that was until I actually sat down and just thought about it a little bit.
One thing I will say about Milo is listening to the beats he produced actually had me sitting there thinking, I'd like to do this.
Yeah.
I'd like to make these sorts of beats. So
Yeah.
thanks, Milo.
Same. I don't think I'd ever write a hip hop album, but if I did, it'd be something like this.
No, I'm going to move to Manchester, and I'm going to learn to rap, and I'm going to learn to make fire beats, and I'm probably going to starve to death in the process, but I'm going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So I'd give this album a 6 out of 10. I enjoy listening to it, but it's not my favourite.
I'm giving this a 7 out of 10, which I think is suitable.
It's just quite a short album. It's not strenuous to listen to.
All the tracks are like 3 minutes or under.
Yeah, 15 tracks, 39 minutes.
So yeah, it does fly by pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Me again. Things are going very well indeed. It had often eluded me who wields the power of the Amp of Eternal Prestige until it hit me. The owner would have to be insanely popular, while at the same time being disliked across the whole planet. Otherwise, why would they need it? Of course, I thought, it could only be Paul McCartney. So off I went to Liverpool, hatching my plan. With 2 pieces of the Infinity set, it was simplicity itself. I pretended to hold an awards evening with the Glitter Ball trophy as the prize. Thanks to the voice changer, all my surviving inmates were other nominees. While McCartney was distracted, we raided his house and found it. I'm halfway there. Strange. It's all seemed so easy so far.
Well, I think we should probably move on to the next album, Joe.
Another album that flies by pretty quickly.
Yep. Next up we have Noname with sophomore effort, Room 25. So Noname is an Illinois rapper / poet / singer. This album's 11 tracks and 35 minutes long, so it's another quite short one. Noname to me doesn't sound anything like her compatriots, both through her lyricism and her flow. I think she's really refreshing to listen to. I listened to her debut mixtape and thought it was like really stand out. And she only appears to have refined her craft from that point onwards. I remember you asking me after listening to Milo, "Oh, do you know any other, ambient music inspired hip hop artists?" And after listening to Telephone, her debut, I said, "Well, No Name's kind of like a female Milo, just a bit more R&B." And then you said, "Oh, she's got a new album out today," and I went, "What?"
Just pure coincidence. She was on my listening list, and there she is.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I do like this album. I think that her flows are sort of like Milo's, very soothing, but also imbued with purpose. And she delivers them at like breakneck speed without it becoming exhausting.
yeah.
Like her work on the album's hooks as well are often very admirable, and she's got such a lovely voice.
It is very, like you said, very soothing and very dreamy, and that it seems to blend in with the textures of the album as well, because the album is in itself very dreamy. It's very lush. It's one of those albums that I like to describe as therapy albums.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that I do wish she would vary her flow a little more. It does feel like on most of the tracks she's trying to get out a million words a minute, and sometimes just like, just
Okay.
slow down, just
Okay.
relax a little bit, please. I mean, I'm fine with it because I mean the album's only 35 minutes long. It doesn't get to the point where I just need to have a nap or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is only 11 tracks. I didn't have the same problem. I thought it flew through pretty fine, really. I think if the album was any longer, I probably would have that problem. But
Yeah.
but no, I thought throughout her flow was fine for me.
I think we should talk about the beats before we move on to talk about her lyricism, because I think that each beat on this album sounds very fresh, as I've said. There's a very charming nature about everything she puts out here. I don't think there's a huge amount of variety once again, but I don't think that's too much of a problem because, like I said, the album's not particularly long. It doesn't have any sort of drag issues. The bass work on the album, we have to talk about the bass work because it's particularly strong, I think.
I actually didn't notice the bass work that much.
Joe.
I noticed the drumming.
I mean, the drumming's great, but did you not notice the combination of the bass work and the drumming on Blaxploitation, for example?
Yes, I did. The bass line was great on that track.
And then on
bass line was great, yeah.
The bass on the Montego Bay as well is fantastic.
Yeah,
it really
pretty much
really pops.
I noticed other things. The last 3 tracks all had fantastic guitar work.
Yeah.
All 3 of them, and I loved all 3 of them because of that. And also, I have to get this out of the way now. I think Window and Regal are absolutely gorgeous. The string arrangements on those tracks, they're Psycho Netto levels of just absolutely breathtaking, and I've listened to them a lot.
I'll agree with you on Window, but Regal was actually my worst track. I don't think it's a bad track. I just feel like with its short length, it just sort of flew by, and it's probably my most unmemorable song on the album.
Oh, but that's probably why I loved it. You've got these string arrangements, these bubbly underwater synths going in and out of them. And her dreamy delivery just melts into it. I just thought it was absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
On the subject of sort of things not being so good, something else I kind of noticed with the album is that I don't think any of the songs end particularly well, with the exception of Self, the opening track, and Ace as well. On all of the others, it just feels like Noname got a bit bored and didn't really know how to finish the track, and so it either just stops or it fades out. There doesn't feel like any of the songs have a suitable conclusion to me.
I'm just gonna have to flat out disagree then. I did not have that problem at all.
More power to you, Joe.
I'm glad
that you didn't get that. Right. Well, let's talk about her lyricism, because oh my god, Noname is a freaking amazing lyricist.
Sometimes.
No,
I would say
all the time.
Not on
I think
Prayer Song.
Her wordsmithery is easily the best thing about this album for me.
I think for the most part, her wordsmithery, good word.
Yeah, I was very pleased when I got to write that down.
Wordsmithery is good. Yeah, I can't deny that. I think there were just 1 or 2 moments where the lyrics kind of didn't really amount to much.
I never got that. I mean, I don't really.
We're getting two completely different things from this album, Nick.
I don't really have any way of combating you saying that, except to say I
think that's fair enough. Like in some of the earlier tracks on the album, especially the first three, kind of tackle more political issues, and I think on Blaxploitation she does that fantastically, noticing all these different exploitations and hypocrisies within American culture. But then on the third track, Prayer Song, to me it just feels like she's mentioning all these things like obesity, everyone's got an iPhone, gentrification, without actually making a point about anything.
Don't ruin this album for me, Joe.
It's just one song, Nick, just one song. So that song kind of I don't know, it fazed me. I didn't really care for it, but for the most part, I'm going to agree with you that her lyricism is great.
I feel like she's effortlessly glides through some of the themes on this album. Like 1 second she'll be talking about politics and mortality and morality, and just moves into themes of like a sexual awakening and heartbreak without you thinking, whoa, that's quite a jump.
Yeah.
I think it's great. In fact, I've just written down a load of lyrics that I like. Can I read them?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So you got, I'm struggling to simmer down, maybe I'm an insomni black. That line always makes me laugh. My pussy teaching 9th grade English, my pussy wrote a thesis on colonialism is great. Then you got, welcome to Beverly Hills, welcome to Vicodin, I took the pills, I think they save lives. Wow. I know you never loved me, but I fucked you anyway. I guess a bitch like to gamble. I guess a bitch like to lonely. And then also, I've got written down, I know everyone goes someday. I know my body's fragile. Know it's made from clay. But if I have to go, I know my soul is still eternal. And my mama don't forget about me.
Yeah.
that made me tear up a little.
Yeah. The penultimate one you mentioned was From Window. And I do think that, for me, that is the highlight of the album. It's my favourite. It's probably my favourite hip-hop track of the year so far. And I thought that her exploring her sexuality in that song was it kind of reminded me of Bjork in a way that it feels organic. It's not shallow at all. It feels like it's being explored in a way that the nuances all make sense. So
of course you'd link it back to Bjork.
Of course I will. I mean, it's got the string arrangements. It's like the hip hop version of something from Vespertine. So
Vespertine is my favourite album by her, so I'm happy for you to make that link. I think that I've already mentioned Blaxploitation as being a track I quite liked. Ace as well has got an amazing verse from Saba, which leads me on to my next point, which is that I think that the guest spots on this album are all pretty great. There isn't one.
There's no weak.
There are no weak points. But Saba in particular has a verse. It's got the most insane delivery, constant breakneck speed. It just doesn't let up. And then there's also the trap part of me wasn't necessarily my favourite, but I had to mention that Benjamin Earl Turner on it sounds exactly like Kendrick Lamar.
I didn't notice that, but now that you've said that,
like I remember listening to it and thinking, how'd she get Kendrick on this track? But no, it's Benjamin Earl Turner.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kendrick should want to get working with this person. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I can easily see them working together.
Yeah.
As well as that, I mean, Don't Forget About Me. I've already referenced lines from, and you can hear the existential angst getting to Warner in the hook of the track.
Yeah.
She really delivers that with power. And Self, the opening track, I just think is a brilliant opener. It sort of eases the listener into the album and introduces them to all the best elements in one track.
Yeah. I mean, considering how gorgeous and lush this album is, it still has a lot of catchiness as well. And I think Self is one of those instantly recognisable beats on the album. So, yeah, really liked Self. And I do have to highlight the last 3 tracks, Part of Me, With You, Noname. They're all in green. I think fantastic streak to end the album with. And I particularly liked the closing track, Noname, because that goes through her reasoning why she went with the name she did, or the people in society who goes by without a name. Yeah. So I thought that was really touching and a really good way to end the album as well.
I like this album. I feel like I've grown to like it more as I've listened to it, because the first time I listened through it, I didn't really take much from it at all. I remember thinking, the first 2 tracks are good. Oh, I don't really remember the rest. But no, it's grown on me a lot. I do think it has some issues which I've already highlighted, but they weren't issues to you, so it's just me being awful. I would give this album a 7 out of 10, probably closer to an 8 than a 6, but
Yeah.
still a 7.
You can probably predict I'm going to give this a good 8 out of 10. I mean, I liked it on first listen. I've loved exploring it. It could potentially even go up, but I think it's a fantastic effort. I'm, pretty excited to see where she goes on from this, really.
Well, that's that one done. Boy, I hope James isn't doing anything nefarious right now.
You know how I said that this was too easy? Yeah, well, the next piece, The Keys of Endless Creativity, were in deep space. Specifically, on the secret David Bowie moon base on Ganymede. Of course, for someone like me, the hard part wasn't getting there, but proving to Bowie's ghost that I was worthy of his treasure. For this, I had to sacrifice that which I loved most, and I thought immediately of my antique collection of kazoos. So, I told him to fuck off and blew the bass up. Easy fucking peasy.
Next up, we have got one which is a little interesting because there's a band called Low, who are from Minnesota, and they have been around for 25 years, and I have never listened to them before. And I saw someone somewhere in some place saying they've just released their best album 25 years into their career, and I thought, I'll give it a shot. So Low have got a new album out called Double Negative. They are a Minnesotan, in inverted commas, slowcore indie band, even though I've heard that they don't really like that term. It's just what people call them. This is their 12th studio album. It is 11 tracks and 49 minutes long. What were your experiences with Low, Joe?
So I'd not listened to Low either.
I just wanted to say, what's your experience with Low, Joe?
Low Joe. I mean, I can give you my experience with this
I
album.
want to hear your experience with Low, Joe.
So this album, well, first thing to note, it flows like one constant song, really. They could have released this as one 48-minute track rather than 11 segments, but of course they did, and that's fine. And with it all flowing, I found it a very consistent album as well. The way they composed all their tracks seemed to be making the most out of minimal layers of distortion, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And seeing where they could draw any kind of hooks or catchiness out of for some of the tracks, and then with others, how they could create the atmosphere. And so I think conceptually, this album works pretty well.
It flows
really.
like melted butter.
It does. But it's got a bit of sand in it because of how distorted it is. So
well, I did some research on the band, and I've read that the band is supposedly famous for being built around the harmonies sung by lead singers Sparhawk and Parker, and this album sure seems to want to turn that on its head, because I mean, like you said, the album is pretty much just atmosphere a lot of the time, and I feel like it's a very cold atmosphere. But the choice to take these gorgeous vocal harmonies, which do shine through at points, and torture them with distortion and pitch shifting, I think is utterly amazing. It makes for such an incredible combination of cold tones, and yet somehow it's still possible to find warmth in what you hear. I think that the soundscapes found on this album are second to none I've heard this year. Like somehow amongst the deafening of both the quiet and the cacophony that's found on this album, all of the chaos remains completely organised. It's like, you're probably going to disagree with me on this, but I think Homogenic by Bjork.
I will disagree, but
I mean, not in terms of exactly how it sounds, but in terms of how organised the chaos is on both albums. That you will disagree with me on that.
I probably will, but continue your point. But
like you said, the album is cohesive and well structured, and I hugely appreciate how much they managed to wring out of these 4-minute long tracks. Because even though most of the tracks have very slow BPMs, hence the slowcore label they've been given. I mean, none of the tracks are that long. The longest one I think is 6.5 minutes.
No, there are very few tracks where I feel like it's lagging, so they do move forward as they should do. Shall I say something?
Yeah, I feel like I've talked a lot.
Okay. I do get the impression this album didn't quite take me as much as it did you. As much as I liked it, I do feel like there were points in this album where I wanted more layers. There were moments, especially in some of the atmospheric sections, where I felt like I wanted a bit more harmony or a bit more build or a bit more something. Like I think that's why the sun I have highlighted in yellow. It didn't do anything for me. It felt That's the one point in the album where I felt like it was dragging, as well as the opening track where there was this distortion loop that didn't really gain much interest. I do feel like there are a few lagging moments in that respect. But that being said, I think the album shines when it's taking the layers that it does have, and then when it's got those vocal hooks on top of them, they're just those moments of euphoria, which I think are great.
I'm glad you think so. The one thing that sort of gets to me on this album is I feel like they build up this amazing atmosphere through the instrumentation and the vocals, and then I'm not really sure what they do with it. The album has lyrics, though at some points you'd be very tested to hear what they actually are underneath all the distortion. But looking into them, I found it very difficult to find any sort of theme that ties the album. And considering how it flows so well throughout, you'd expect them to come up with some sort of theme to tie it all together, and it just doesn't. And I feel like that's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, I did get like a bit of theme about a relationship that was somewhat manipulative, but I don't know whether that's me doing my thing and reading into things.
I didn't get that at all.
But I do kind of agree with you that I would have liked a bit of thematic potency.
Yeah, I've read some reviews which said that it's got a sort of post-Trump political edge to it, and I just didn't find that at all in the album.
There's definitely not that in there. A lot of people will read what they want into art, I think. Yeah, it's myself included, but
it's a real shame, because otherwise I do find a lot to admire in this album. It's one which I had some trouble picking out favourite tracks on because of how sort of linked they all are, how much it flows. I came up with Tempest. I think is a great track. I love it's probably one of the most distorted tracks on the album, and yet it's also one of the warmest, I think. It's got these layering that builds and falls and builds again, and it's makes my spine tingle a bit. And then Fly as well, just because Parker's vocals on that are so good.
Yeah, and I like when the bass comes in the second chorus. It gives it that more rhythmical structure, and it feels...
Newsflash, Joe likes the bass.
I like the bass. It probably won't surprise you that my other two highlights were the final two tracks.
Disarray was another one that I labelled as being great. I really liked the fragility of the penultimate track, Rome, where it feels like it's coming out of this fragility, but then it's so explosive afterwards. And I think given the structure of the entire album, it just gave that song so much more emphasis and drive. And I really felt like it was coming towards that conclusion, which, of course, it does come to in Disarray, one of the catchiest songs on the album. So yeah, Disarray is a brilliant closer. It's a relatively fast song for the band at a breezy 103 beats per minute.
Yeah.
And I think that the fuzz that they put onto the sort of staccato stabs throughout creates a percussive feel which is very much lacking on the rest of the album. Not in a bad way, but I think it's just really refreshing to have it put in at the end.
Yeah.
It's also got some lyrics which I actually managed to make note of without me just doing it for the sake of it, because I think that the line, before it falls into total disarray, you'll have to learn to live a different way, too late to look back on apocryphal verse, and to be something beyond kinder than words. I think that's fantastic. I love that verse. But beyond that, there wasn't much for me to be able to pick out from the album, because it, like you said, it flows.
Yeah, it's one body of work, really.
Yeah.
And with that to say, I don't really have much else to really comment on.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't any tracks that I've said, oh, I don't like that so much. So I don't really have many more negative viewpoints to put forwards besides the thematic work on the album. So I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going with a strong 7. Strong 7. I do think it's a unique album which I give it a lot of points for. I think a lot of people will like it, but some execution flaws here and there. But I think it's a great album that a lot of people enjoy.
Yeah, I'd be interested to go and listen to some of their other albums now, considering that this is apparently quite a change for them. So I'll go and
see
do
the
that,
difference.
and I'll probably be disappointed that they sound nothing like this. I guess there's only one last thing to do, which is to talk about other releases that we're not going to talk about in full that we've listened to. You listen to anything?
No.
No?
No.
Well, I've got a couple. I've listened to Toby Driver's new album, They Are the Shield, Toby Driver being one of the key members of KO Dot and Maudlin of the Well. I don't have huge amounts to say on this album. You'd probably like it because it's prog.
Yeah.
It's got some really nice string arrangements and it's very, very well produced. It sounds like a sort of more classical Stephen Wilson release, I think. But I've only listened to it twice and I haven't got much memorable out of it, which is a shame.
Yeah.
The only other one I want to talk about is Aphex Twin's new EP, Collapse EP. It does dip towards the end, but I still think that any of Aphex Twin's lesser works are still something that most other electronic artists would probably aspire to make.
Yeah.
And the opening track on it, T69 Collapse, I think is actually one of the best things he's probably ever done. It's got the most incredible switch up in the middle with the squelchiest synths I've ever heard in my life.
Squelch. Yeah, it's a good way to describe it. I have listened to it, but only once. Haven't given it that much time, unfortunately. But it is a good release.
Yeah.
Good release.
Well, I think that's it for us. We will be back in about a month's time for our Halloween Spooktacular.
Yay! I love Halloween.
If you remember last year, Joe died.
I'm still dead.
Yeah.
I'm a ghost.
Joe fell into the pit and died.
No one's got me any smelling salts.
With that, we're going to call it an end. I've been Nick.
I've been Joe.
And you've been listening to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited.
Goodbye.
F Sharp A Sharp Revisited.